Welcome to the Pacenotes, a podcast about all things Porsche. Today, we're going to talk about the differences between the Longhood 911 models. Greg, start us off.
Sure. So starting in the first series, 1965 model year, there's a lot of things that we look for in trying to identify whether a car is original. And we've touched on this in earlier episodes about originality versus restoration. But a lot of customers have come in and asked us about, what's the difference between a T and an E and an S? And then you have, S trim packages on a T. What does all that mean? So, chronologically, I want to kind of go down the list.
It does get confusing. So
it
it's
gets
definitely
really confusing.
something that I was confused on for a while myself. So
Right.
So starting with the 65, 64 for depending on what you believe.
Yeah, exactly.
Starting with the 65 911s.
We saw that those were a carbureted 2-liter motor. So some of the things we look for right off the bat on these early 911s are between 65, 66. You're running Solexes. So I jumped straight to the carburetors.
And halfway through 66, they changed to Weber.
Correct.
So the Solexes were the individual carburetor, right?
Right. And what you'd find is a lot of people, would replace the Solexes with Webers just for performance upgrades. So a lot of these things just go missing over the years.
And then you wish didn't, because Solexes are super expensive now.
Of course, because everybody threw them away.
Yeah.
You ran into your bumpers with those chrome bumper guards on the earlier cars.
And the early cars, the earlier cars didn't have rubber on them, right?
No.
It was just plain chrome bumper
It was all
racks,
chrome. 67, they started releasing with that rubber pad on them.
67, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. On the grill, you'd find that, the chrome grill that we're all used to seeing, that carried up all the way through, 72 or 71, 72, they introduced that black grill.
Black.
The mirrors, that's a really good indicator when you start talking about some of these model year transitions. We had that earlier style round Durant mirror.
And that was the one from 64 all the way to 68? Or was that?
To 68, yeah.
So that was the same mirror all throughout.
Yeah, so it was that round one that was flat. Then they went to that larger Durant
thicker
mirror.
one?
Yeah,
For
that
the
was
60. It was 68 or 69 they changed that one?
69, they went to that
69
Durant.
they went to Durant. Okay.
You saw that narrow deco trim, which actually is
This
69
car.
here. You can narrow deco trim on that. Later cars, you had S trim, but we'll get into that when we go down that road. Logos at that point, they were all gold. Again, we didn't have any model designations. It was just the 911. So you'd see on the 66, early 66 and below, you had the 911
Sideways.
Right.
Or the diagonal.
Yeah, at an angle in the bottom right corner of the deck lid.
And the Porsche was together and not separated.
Exactly. Yep. One interesting thing, and I see this, kind of change all over the place, is the wiper blades were resting on the passenger side up until 67.
And that's when you'd have people who don't know them as well put them on the opposite side, and then they scratch their car.
Yeah, exactly. Wing windows. They had wing windows all the way up to 68, but that
68, and then that was a half-year thing too, right? Wasn't 68 halfway through they went to the
there's
standard?
a lot of weird changes in 68 as they started transitioning.
And there was even throughout 68, like 70, 71, there were half-year things, like with the Fuchs and with mirrors and all that kind of stuff. But we'll get to that later. But
so you had the wing windows, which people liked. You always had them on the Targas, but specifically with coupes, those went away going in 69 forward. The gauges. People had green gauges.
with the chrome bezel, right?
Yep.
And it was just partially like chrome and black, wasn't it, kind of? Or was the whole...
The whole bezel was chrome, and then you had the green lettering and all that, which changed. 68, they went to the standard white that everyone saw.
Got it.
Your Targa came out in 67.
My Targa.
Your Targa.
Targa.
So at that point, you had the soft top.
No
roll
slits
top.
though, right?
No vents on the sides, and that foldable plastic window. So
And
the soft window.
the Targa came out because they could not do a convertible.
Right.
Correct? They didn't know how to strengthen the body to make it support a convertible.
They wanted that roll bar or anti-roll bar, or rollover bar is what they called it. So I mean, there was the quick and dirties on those. Oh, and the horn grills. The early 64 to 65, you'd have the four bolt horn grills
Okay.
up front. And
That's
then,
64, 65 and early, that's just 64, 65.
yeah, you
correct?
see a few early 66 that transition still had that
Just like
four-hole bolt
every
pattern.
other year, you see things transfer over to the next model just because
Right.
they had them in stock.
Exactly. They want to use up the fenders, so just
Mm-hmm.
move them over. So I'm sure some of the earliest 66s still had them.
And so on the 65, 66s, 64s, basically the very beginning of the 911, what were the key points to look at versus like 67 and 68? Because they were like the four bolt horn grill. I think the 64 early 65s had back here it was just flat, right? There was no indent for decals, correct?
Correct. You had that slanted 911 text. You had your wood paneling on the interior,
Did all of them come with wood steering wheels?
wood steering wheels, and some of the earliest ones were aluminum spoke versus a steel spoke.
Okay.
So that was, and those have gone through the roof price-wise. So that was a big indicator.
Engine wise, they were just a 2-liter carbureted with Solex until halfway through
Yeah,
66.
about 130
whatever.
horsepower, 2-liter. Yeah, all pretty much the same until 67S came out. And so that was the first
That
model
changed the
variant.
whole-
That changed all of it, right? So they initially had that power output of 160. So a little bump there. They had hotter cams.
That's where the IDS carburetors came in, right?
IDS. They start off as IDAs, Weber IDAs, and then they kind of stamped an S at the end. Yeah, the IDSs are pretty interesting. You can notice them because they've got that high-speed kind of accelerator sprayer up top that a lot of people take off, but it's a little arm that sticks up.
Yeah.
That's pretty sweet. First year of the Fuchs, so they had those 4.5 Fuchs in 67.
Super cheap now, right?
Really cheap, yeah. About $8,000 a set. They started adding, the wider deco trim, so you've got this narrow, probably about 3/4 of an inch.
Now, the wider deco trim came out in 67.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
and so that was the thicker one that came.
That was the
seen
thicker
most
one.
911s now.
Yeah. You had that door sill, aluminum door sill.
I didn't know
panel
that
went
came out
across.
in 67. I thought that was the later thing.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
You had 7,200K tack on that S, so that was a 1-year only thing, because 67 was the first, green gauges, 7,200K tack.
Did 68 in Europe have 6200?
The 7,200, it would have been, but it would have been white.
Okay.
Yeah,
White.
because the gauges went from green to white
Okay. Cool.
in 68. And then your Fuchs went to 5.5s in 68. So there's a bunch of other nuances there, but when you're looking at a 67S, those are the biggest identifiers. They also had a vented brake.
All right. So in 1968, you had the T
Right.
and the 911L was the replacement for the S, at least for the United States.
For the United
because-
States, yeah.
Because they couldn't pass emissions, correct?
Right.
And the T was basically the touring, and they were trying to start doing that, basically substitute the 911T for the 912.
Yeah, that was the new base model, basically, that replaced, it was detuned, running 110 horsepower instead of the 130.
Of course, you still had the 912 at the time, but they were subbing it out at the time.
They're starting to go away.
Got it.
A lot easier to crank out a detuned 6-cylinder than create a totally different motor for this car that wasn't selling too hot.
Yeah. Okay. And so the L basically came with what the S was supposed to have on it, except for the engine,
Right.
which was a base.
So
911
yeah,
engine.
basically S trim with, T-type
Very exciting.
motor. Yeah, it wasn't too super, but
I kind of liked them because they're funky. I mean, you don't see them very often.
Right.
It's a 1-year only thing,
Right.
which are always kind of a cool thing to see.
Exactly.
I personally love I don't know a lot of people agree, but I personally like the 73.5 because of the CIS, and it's just a half a year thing that they did to the
Right.
CIS injection. And there's a few things to that injection that was kind of cool. With you get like 25 miles to the gallon on that.
oh yeah, no, it was a great system.
But back to the 68 model.
Sure. 68, you saw, Sportomatics were getting, well, I say more popular, but at least being introduced a little heavier.
Like our Targa Sportomatic L
Yeah.
unicorn that we had.
Yeah, that was where, and we had a burgundy and a silver one, right?
We've got a white Sportomatic.
Yeah.
No, we've got the 73 Sportomatic right now, but
Yeah.
we've only had two. But the silver one was definitely a unicorn because it was just a weird car, but it was also a blast to drive.
Yeah.
But yeah, so 68 was definitely kind of that was an in between year because they were just going to go to this. They're going to the long wheelbase
Right.
the next year, the year after that. I think they also changed the wing windows in the middle of 68.
Yeah, they started going towards the fixed windows, which wing windows are great for ventilation, but they kept those going for the Targas later on, but they were for the coupes. They were gone basically towards the end of 68. You also had that weird one year only like elephant skin vinyl that was in the 68s.
And the 68 had the door pocket. It had the different. It was also a 1 year only interior.
Yeah.
Because he had the weird pockets.
Right, little accordion plastic pockets.
Yeah. So and that was definitely a different year, and then that was leading into the long wheelbase, which is the next big jump for Porsche with the long wheelbase cars.
Right. And that's when they introduced the 911E, which was the replacement for the L.
And that stayed, 69 to 73 is the T, the E, and the S, which are today are the very they're the popular ones.
Sure.
And so
T being base, E being kind of the mid tier, and then the S being the upper tier of that.
And T was touring, E was like Einsprung or something like that.
Einspritzung.
Nice.
Which means, fuel injection.
It's a nice pronunciation.
Yeah, it's probably way off.
And then S was Sport or Super, correct?
Sport or Super. The jury's still out on that one. People kind of bounce between both of them. I go for Super like the 356.
Yeah.
But Sport's wildly accepted.
That's what I've always called it. And then, so the 69, you had still 2-liter engine. You still, and 69 still kept some of the things from the year before. The door handles, correct? The door handles were the same. You had the mirrors, the mirrors were stayed till 71, halfway through 71.
Yeah, you started getting the larger Durant mirrors.
Okay.
In 69, so that was the
Thicker ones.
They're thicker, and the glass was inset. Yep, that one right there. The deck lid grill stayed the same. You had the chrome plated bumper guards with the rubber pads. Those are all standard. Wiper blades are on the driver's side now. Your emblems, you could definitely spot a T as there were silver emblems instead of gold on the E's and S's.
But you could still option it with the gold.
But if you optioned
the S package,
that's where it got confusing because you'd have T's optioned with S trim, and so it looked the same as an S or an E, but from a performance perspective, it's different.
So here's a question: T in 69, did that come with these wheels that we're seeing on this car, the Steely wheels, or did the Fuchs come standard? Or do we know?
Fuchs were optional at that point. Yeah, steels should have been still standard on the T's.
T just came with a steel.
Until you got to 72, 73, they started doing the ATS cookie cutters, replace the steels.
Okay.
Yeah, which you see. A lot of people say they came on the E's, but you usually see them on the T's. Yeah, they're not really a favorite.
I like
wheel.
the Steelies. Like this car, I think to some of those cars, you still have that classic, iconic. You got all the chrome and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So the Steelies make sense and it looks good.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then once you go to like 73, you start getting more black trim and it doesn't look as correct.
Yeah.
But I do like the Steely wheels, but they're just like thin.
And they're heavy. They're going for getting rid of the unsprung weight. So we didn't touch on it too much, but 69 is when they went away from those bumper weights. So this is all the long wheelbase transition where they're trying to 68 and earlier they were trying to figure out how to get this thing to perform better. So they added front bumper weights. They started.
69, they went to the dual battery box,
the dual
right?
battery boxes. Even up through like 72, you saw them move that oil.
They never really stopped. That was
The
that
oil
was a
moved
good one.
up in front of the rear wheels, and
you get all these exploded engines coming.
Yeah. Gas station attendants putting fuel in the.
We had a car here. It was a 72S actually, that the engine was not matching because of that. They put fuel in the oil door, and I suppose we had to be rebuilt. But it's funny to see that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, no, it's hilarious.
And now everyone wants the 70. Everyone wants the side oil door. Like the singers all have the side oil door, and it's the cool thing to do now.
Sure.
And 72 is a desirable year now because of that. So it's kind of just like one of those quirky things that.
Yeah.
But for engine wise, TES 60. I mean, I guess horsepower wise it's going to change, throughout the years because you got 2.2, 2.0, and a 2.4.
Right.
What
Yeah.
kind of power were you getting out of the E's and the S's versus the
Oh,
T?
you bounced around between 110 horsepower to 130 in the T's. E's, I believe you started at like 150, 153. Your S's bounced, from the early
Like
S.
190 for 2.4s, I know.
Yeah, so you went from like 160 horsepower on the carbureted 67S up to like 190 on the later MFI. Generally speaking, the T's were carbureted for U.S. models, to 72.
Until 71. 72, all of them went MFI. I think the E's have always been, I think, my favorite because, for a street car, they just make it's a lot of fun. I mean, really, these days you're not buying, these cars as much to just like go tracking. You're buying them to, just drive around the street.
You're not winding them up to 7K. And they had those,
people are.
the
That's
E-cam.
fine.
People love the E-cams, right?
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean,
it still uses. I mean, that's a very common cam to use on engine builds today.
right. And the E's actually had a better acceleration than the S's.
Oh, yeah, they were definitely quicker off the line. So I've always liked the E's because of that. The drivability's a little better. Obviously, when you're ripping on it, then the S is better. But just driving around town, the E's a fun car to drive. So now the E's, what came standard on those? Like, what was the difference besides the engine?
You saw mostly S trim. It's going to be basically a detuned S or a tuned T with S trim. So once you start getting into a T with S trim and comparing that to an E, it starts getting a little muddy, with the exception of carburation versus fuel injection, unless you hit those 72, 73 years.
And so 69, I know had the Webers, and then in 70 they changed to Zeniths,
You went over to Zenith.
and then the MFI in 72.
Correct. And for all the models in 70 and 71, you saw them switch from that push button door handle over to the trigger door handles.
Trigger was 70, right?
Yep, 70, 71. And then they went over to the 2.2 motor as well.
And then the flag mirror was changed halfway through 71.
Correct.
Same thing with the Fuchs. They went with the flat Fuchs halfway through 71.
Right.
Which I remember figuring that out because we got a car here and I was thinking it wasn't the original wheels because I was thinking it should have the deep ones. I was like, oh, wait a second, it's a half-year thing. But yeah. And then in 72, some of the interior, I guess itself stayed the same, but the material they used, they stopped using the weave, square weave, and they used just regular kind of grainy vinyl.
Yeah, grainy leatherette.
And then also the same thing on the dash. And they didn't have the 911 T, E, or S on the front dash, correct?
Right, on the glove box.
Yeah, that was only with the square weave interiors on it.
Correct.
So yeah, 71 was a kind of a mid-year rear with the mirrors and just the Fuchs. Basically, that's it. And then, the following year was the big jump with the 2.4, and all of the cars, including the T, had the mechanical fuel injection.
Right. For U.S.
For U.S. So Euro
was still carbureted.
Really?
Yep.
Nice. That's kind of nice. That's like a positive for the U.S. for once, because all the other years they added all these emission rules and they couldn't do it. But they did do it for the emissions, didn't they?
That was the only way they could get. Yeah, they could get it in there.
Okay. So yeah, the
carbs weren't cutting it.
But 72 and then 72 had the oil door.
Yeah, the oil door and the 915 transmission
915
was huge. That was.
I mean, they had been with the 901 from the start of it all the way till 72.
People were complaining about having that dog leg, so it's.
Which I love.
I love
the dog leg,
it.
but it's the 915 is just a strong. I mean, I love the 915. It's a strong
bigger,
transmission.
stronger.
But yeah, that was another big jump. And then you had the 2.4 liters.
Right. You got that split chin spoiler on the S's, which people and you can actually option.
So the split chin spoiler came out in 72.
Correct.
Really?
Yep. And was optional for any of the models, but a very common upgrade. You can always tell.
I thought you could get them on 70, 71.
No, that was standard for 72.
Got it.
So
I like them.
yeah, they're great.
I like both versions of it.
You see a lot of fiberglass ones out there. Factory was metal. Yeah, they're.
I like the metal ones. They're good looking.
And they ditched a lot of the chrome too, didn't they? And
Yeah, so the rear, all the rear decals, the rear grille, basically the Porsche, the 911, all that was in black as well as
Black Andes.
well, in 73 they had the front black horn grills that were plastic.
They were plastic, yeah.
But in 72, you could also option the metal bumperettes in black. So you could have them painted black instead. And then what else was black on those? I think that was it, right?
Yeah, in 72. That's when they also had that chrome 2.4 emblem on the grill as well. Obviously, the introduction of the 2.4.
Okay.
So, that's a pretty good overview of, the big takeaways here, the differences between the T's, E's, and the S's. There's nuances for every year and every model and every variant.
It's easy to get confused with it.
Yeah.
That's how this came up today. We were talking about, or I guess the other day we were talking about basically what would come standard on models, and what it came down to, there's nothing really always standard on a model. You'd see a T, but it's got all these S things on it.
Right, and if you don't have a COA or a Cardex,
which doesn't, well, the Cardex does, but
Yeah.
you can get a COA now, but those don't always have everything on them.
Right.
And most of the time they're wrong, or they don't have all the options that came
Right.
from the dealer or whatever.
Yeah, and you'll find, we had a car in recently, a T that had a lot of S options on it, and somebody just took it in and did a little bit of race prep on it back in the day. So it had, S calipers and 67S Weber carburetors. A lot of great stuff.
And then you get cars like the 73 Sportomatic that we have that you're just like, there's no way this came optioned like this. And then
Right.
it is.
Yeah.
It's funny to see those, cars that are just super quirky, and like, why would you option a Sportomatic with sports seats?
Right, just everything that has the word
options.
S in there.
But anyways, yeah, so that's, basically covering the different models and the trim packages
Right.
and all that came on the Longhood 911 models.
Right. The biggest thing for us is, we check Cardexes and COAs and, just our knowledge of these models and the various changes throughout the years. We can identify which models and what parts have been taken off, been replaced. And that's the biggest thing when we do PPIs.
Yeah.
Is, our knowledge base and our tech's knowledge base on these vehicles and their variances.
When you notice some of that stuff, and some cars may look super original, but someone changes one thing out, like carburetor or something like that. It's like, well, they changed that out. What else have they changed out? And that's always when I'm looking for cars that we're going to buy. I'm always looking at, okay, what's been changed out, and if things have been changed out, then what else has been changed out?
Right.
As soon as one thing pops in your mind, you're like, okay, what else is
gotta
there?
check everything
What
else.
else is missing? So,
Yeah, you can't just stop at transmission number and motor number.
Yeah.
Because chances are, wheels have been changed, and so check the date stamps on those. Badge and emblems change pretty often, so do
and it
seats.
depends what you're going to look at. If you're looking at an all original car, then yes, you
Yeah.
want everything, and you don't want it to be perfect either. You want it to be slightly used or
Right.
look old. If things are too perfect, you're like, okay, there's something
Yeah.
wrong here. But yeah, and sometimes you're going to look for a driver car or a hot rod car, and then everything changes.
Yeah.
But as far as looking at original cars, then this is kind of the stuff to focus on
Right.
when going to look at them.
So if you want to schedule a PPI or you're interested in anything we've been talking about today, feel free, give us a call, check our website, check us out on Instagram,
Click the link below.
click the link below.
Thank you for joining us on the Pacenotes podcast about all things Porsche.
So bad.